King of the Hill has returned, and I did review the original series on my second channel, which kind of was a mistake. I should have reviewed it on this channel, but you can check that out on my second channel. Um, I really like King of the Hill. I did a binge watch of all 13 seasons. I watched like one episode a day for basically months. It took me like almost a year to do that. And it was just a really great binge watch, finally watching through the whole series. Something I meant to do a while ago. I'm actually doing a similar thing with Bob's Burgers. I'm like season 12 out of 15. So hopefully I'll be finished with that by October. But I really love King of the Hill. I like anything Mike Judge really does. Except a couple other random projects he did that were just kind of lesser. But for the most part, Office Space, Idiocracy, King of the Hill, Beavis and Butthead, all that stuff. It's just wonderful stuff. I, like a lot of people, was very skeptical of a King of the Hill reboot. I will talk about some spoilers here, but there's been a few reasons. First of all, in recent months and years since this project's been in development, so many of these people who worked on the show passed away. Of course, Brittany Murphy and Tom Petty were already dead for a while. But then you have, Chuck Mangione, passing away. You have John Redcorn's voice actor, Dale's voice actor passing away. All these people are gone. And so it just kind of put this show in a negative light. Also, this is a very political show. And so kind of how would that play into modern politics as being in certain ways that they are? It's very different than it was when the show was on the air. I did have faith in what's his name? Mike Judge. Sorry, I don't know why I just said his name and I went blank on his name. Anyways, I really had faith in his work and his writing to do that. He is really good at playing certain angles with politics in a really great way that really breaks everything down in such a way that really makes a lot of sense, right? And so I am so thrilled to say I really like this show, and I think it worked out really well, even if I don't think it's perfect. First of all, I don't think anything can ever live up to that original series. There are just so many wonderful things about it. And I think that this show definitely has a lot less to say than the original run. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It has new things to say, new scenarios with an aged up Bobby and an aged up Hank Hill and Peggy and all these characters. I think it's lacking in some instances. We'll get into some spoilers and stuff, so just click off now if you don't want spoilers. I really think the show is very good. I thought the animation was a big concern for some people, but honestly, I didn't really notice watching it. I've been watching the new Phineas and Ferb season, and I'll probably review that on my second channel. And you notice the animation in that show season, where here I don't notice it. I think it's fine. I think it's actually worked out pretty well. But I really was satisfied with a lot of it. Again, I don't think it's perfect. I'm surprised that in this season we didn't get anything with Luann or Lucky. Now, I did hear the creators talk about how they written them off in a specific way. And I think that the fact that they're not telling us how means that they probably will do a video on that. Or not a reveal on that later on in next batch of episodes, which I'm assuming are already done, because if this is anything like how they do Futurama, they make 20 episodes and then they space them out over a year's time, which is not a bad way of doing things, but it is kind of crazy when you make 20 episodes and still just can't release them all in one batch, because that's the way we used to do things, right? We used to not have 20 episodes airing weekly, but now we don't do that, which is annoying. But I digress. I think that my favorite episode is the one with Hank and GH, because that was the most one of the plotlines I was most curious to see. How would Cotton's other son, that is significant, almost the age that Bobby was in the original series, not slightly older, I believe. And how would Hank respond to that and deal with what his father was and knowing who he was, and this character not really knowing anything about who Cotton Hill was. I think they play into that well. I like what the stuff they do with how Bobby kind of discovers his relationships in an older age. I like a lot of that stuff. You know, if I do have the biggest critique for me that really bugs me, and this is just a personal thing, the character of Dale is a conspiracy nut. And to remove that from his character would be a bad thing. But I think they also did a really flawed job to me of not playing into the fact that Dale's conspiracy theories that he believes are shit that actual people believe now in our modern times and have actually gotten people killed. You know, there's a joke about him being election denier, which is a funny joke, but also let's not forget that election deniers are real people and they've gotten shot and killed at our capital for the shit that they believe. And so I think you can make jokes like that, but I think it would be very misplaced of the writers at some point in this new run of episodes to not play into the fact that Dale's conspiracy theories are no longer the funny things that we thought they were, because now they're shit like that is just a reality. You know, the joke of Dale being a character with all these conspiracy theories. Like, I think about that joke when Dale goes up to this guy and goes, "That's what they want you to think," and he's like, "Sir, we are they." That is totally the people who are mad about Trump being not releasing the Epstein files, and they're blaming all these people and not realizing they are the people who are not releasing them, you know? Trump and his people. So it's like a lot of that kind of different stuff. Like, some of those jokes are still funny and you can laugh at them as comedy, but I also think there needs to be that humorous aspect of it, but also that more hardened look at the reality of what Dale believes and maybe kind of beating some of that out of him. Not entirely that to remove the conspiracy aspect to it, right? Because, you know, you still have that great episode in this season where he thinks that because Hank and them were at the base in Saudi Arabia, that Hank was mind controlled or whatever into liking soccer. See, that's a funny joke that, you know, isn't that close to the realities of real stuff. But other certain ones he does believe are shit that real people believe. So I think there's interesting jokes and story details to play into this season that we need to kind of look at, play around with, see what we need to do there. I do love this run of episodes that I think is great on multiple levels. But I do think that aspects like that need to be explored more. Also, I do think it's funny that they're not as critical as Texas. I know Hank Hill lives in a small town of Marlin, but there's still a lot of stuff going on in Texas that's crazy, especially in the news right now, that I feel like maybe needs to become part of the show and be a further critique. I know in the original series they didn't tend to do that, but I think this is the perfect chance for them to start kind of exploring more stuff going on. I do think a lot of it really worked. One of my favorite moments in the new season was when he was criticizing these girls with the Girl Scout cookies, and she's like, "Oh, we changed this name to be less offensive to this group or whatever." Hank Hill's like, "That's a good change." And I think that is the thing with the show, and of what this new era of the show is going for, is about things changing for the good and what that looks like. And I think that is a really neat thesis to explore. I still think that there's a lot of flaws here that we need to look at and explore a little bit more, but I do really love this new batch of episodes. So let me know your thoughts, like, share, and subscribe.